Dan, how are you?
I'm tired, Robin. We were up late. I was up early. It was a wild night.
It was a seriously wild night last night. I think we were live streaming for over 2 hours while the election results were coming in, and it was pretty raucous.
Yes. Viewers, if you would like to volunteer to be our helpers next election coverage, we needed help. We needed more help. We needed more locations. We weren't at the Thirsty Owl. Shame on us.
No, we were. We were. Adam was there.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
lost track. I lost track of who was where. Okay,
yeah.
but we still needed extra bodies last night.
We could have used an extra body or two. I just need my kids to be like a year or two older, and then we could just put them to work. But I was actually pretty impressed with how we handled it, considering how much was going on. I'm 99% certain we were able to call the races before any other major news outlet. And I've heard from a lot of people that we had the most up-to-date numbers consistently while we were live streaming. So, yay.
Yes, I went to the at one point late the TU and the Gazette websites, and they were not helpful at all. It
Yeah,
was
I
we
know. I
were
think,
way ahead of them, hours ahead of any of what I could see from anybody else.
yeah, yeah, no, yeah, the same thing here. And apologies for our fatigue today, but it was it was a late night and we are both running on fumes. But we really wanted to talk about last night's election results. It
Yes,
was a very dramatic victory. Incumbent Mayor Kim was upset by Republican candidate John Safford. I think that was a surprise to many because it has been such a long time since we've had a Republican win the mayoral seat specifically. And then we had the Commissioner of Public Safety race. Tim Cole pulled that race off with a very commanding, I think, almost 20-point margin.
yes, less of a surprise.
Yes, yes. And then the supervisor race was won by Matt Beach and Michelle Madigan. Although all three candidates were pretty tight. I think they were all within, I don't know, maybe a 6 or 7 point margin from.
Yes, and this is a bit of a tangent, but I really want to make sure we acknowledge this. And this is out there, but maybe not so publicly. Um, Gordon Boyd lost his wife, Sharon, I believe, just a little over 2 weeks ago. And I want to acknowledge that both from a human standpoint and also just it did obviously affect his effort. Not taking anything away from Matt or Michelle, but I just want to acknowledge that and express sympathies from me, you, and Adam. Adam and I did previously to him,
Yes,
but I just thought we should acknowledge that at some point today, and I
yes.
want to do it now before we get lost.
Of course, he won't come on a podcast with me, but I will acknowledge it from afar. And of course, it's a terrible tragedy, and I was extremely sorry to hear about it. Um, that being said, he did run a very negative campaign at the end for his supervisor race. He really went after Michelle Madigan, and I'm not sure that paid off for him. I don't think voters like that. I really don't. So
Well,
I want to get into this more, but we have Mike Brandy with us. Where are you, Mike? Here you are. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hey guys, I'm good. How are you?
We're sleepy. We're excited, but we're sleepy.
Yeah. It was a late night last night, but a lot of fun, a lot of celebration, and good stuff all around. So, but then the phone's been ringing off the hook this morning, trying to return texts and touch base with people. But yeah, all good stuff.
Well, we really wanted to bring you on because this is a really monumental victory for the Republicans and for your candidates. You came off of a challenging last election cycle that you didn't have a ton of success in, and came back with a vengeance this year. And we just want to say congratulations on a job well done.
Yeah, it was a lot of hard work. It was 2 years. Once we lost Skip and we had a unified Democratic council, we had no one on the inside, no one who was looking at what's going on. They had this cloister mentality where no one could know what was going on. You heard what the party line was, what they were saying publicly, but we didn't have much going on behind the scenes. So we did what we could with the tools we had to hold them accountable and try to figure out what was going on and bring that to the people in whatever forms we could. And much credit to the people of Saratoga Springs. They pay attention, they're engaged voters, and they turn out. You compare our turnout locally to other bigger towns, to Troy, which is a large city, and we turn out in not even just proportionally higher numbers, we just turn out in higher numbers. So it's a credit to our citizens and our voters for paying attention and staying engaged and being willing to look at all the candidates.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Mike, the crediting the voters, because I feel the same way. I think I didn't give them enough credit in the past few weeks because this election, some of it caught me off guard. And clearly the voters were paying attention to the issues. You can tell that not just in the overall results, but in the nuanced results. For instance, Chris Mathieson, pretty solid outing there and things like that. So kudos to the voters in Saratoga Springs for, like you said, coming out to vote, but apparently paying attention when some people like me maybe thought not enough of them were paying attention.
We actually won an award in 2021 for so they gave it out to one small city in New York State and one large city in New York State. But we won the award for it was called most votingest city. Basically, we had the highest turnout of any small city in the state, which I thought was really a reflection of how engaged people are here in their community and politics,
Certainly, and we look at Dan, you mentioned the nuance of the numbers, and we're certainly still crunching the numbers, but you compare how Gordon did, who was endorsed Democratic candidate, versus Kim, and Gordon was outperforming Kim in pretty much every single election district. So you had people going in voting on row A for Gordon, and then leaving row A to vote for someone else for mayor, or leaving it blank. So you had people that were consciously, not party line voting, which I think is heartening for me, just not as a Republican or as a partisan person, but just as a fan of democracy. It's nice to see that people are doing that.
Well, I think that leads us kind of perfectly into what I think was really a game changer in this election cycle, which was the One Saratoga line. This was the first time One Saratoga as a concept was started in 2019 by Commissioner Michelle Madigan. It was something that Meg Kelly and I ran on hard in 2019, which was a city above party philosophy. And this past year was the first time, though, we tried to petition to get a line on the ballot for One Saratoga. And then we were able to have a bipartisan group of candidates on that line. But specifically for the Republicans, it seems to me, when I look at the last several election cycles, that the Republicans basically max out at 45% of the vote on their line. And so this year, having the Republican candidates also have that One Saratoga line really pushed them across the finish line. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's remarkably consistent quirk of local politics where the Republican candidates, whether it's in a governor's year where we had Anthony Scirocco running, that was an interesting case study because we don't usually have that, a local election combined with a governor's race. And he still turned out, 43, 45% around that mark. Our candidates in 2021, pretty similar, I think on the low end, 43, the high end, close to 45. And this year, again, Safford, I think he might have hit 46, but again, still within that ballpark. So our Republican voters are consistent and they turn out, but alone, it's tough to win. So you need to look at other ways. How do we, in the old days, we had the independence line. So we could, put candidates, candidates could run in the independence line and give voters a different way to vote for them versus one of the partisan lines, A or B. So yeah, One Saratoga is something, again, I give credit to the voters of this city and the people of One Saratoga for having doing that effort. New York State has gone out of its way to make it very hard for independent lines to appear on the ballot. They increased the signature requirement. It used to be fairly easy. We used to have the independence line and some additional lines that were perennials on the ballot, but they made it more difficult for them to get on there. We lost the independence line.
I have to interrupt you.
About the independence line and the misnomer of it, but
I have to interrupt you on that.
Sure.
That was all Andrew Cuomo, and that bothers me. What he did to the small part of the third parties. That was all Andrew Cuomo being Andrew Cuomo. Sorry, I interrupted you. I had to get that off my chest. Go ahead.
Yep, you're spot on. He was lashing out against the Working Families Party, and because I think they endorsed Cynthia Nixon, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was all classic Cuomo, vengeance.
Yes.
But it's wild. I mean, in 2019, I had 5 ballot lines. and and then obviously they all disappeared after that legislation was passed, and really it was just to maintain Democratic control in the state, and in my opinion stifled democracy, because I think a democracy thrives when you have everyone has an opportunity to put themselves out there and be on a ballot. So I think the one Saratoga factor was really significant last night. And when I'm putting up some of these vote totals, so I'm looking at the mayoral race, and Chris Matthiessen took 1,420 votes on the one Saratoga line. I have to imagine those were votes that probably would have gone to Ron Kim if he had not been on the ballot. Would you guys agree with that?
I think looking at the numbers, I think we crunched the numbers. I think it's the majority. I think it's probably a little more evenly split than I initially thought it would be. I think we're thinking it's about 60-40 or 70-30. So definitely an advantage for Safford there. But some polling we did for the Safford camp early on, which was almost a little red flag. I was kind of like, uh-oh. It showed that Chris Matthiessen was polling evenly from Republicans to Democrats. That was a poll of 300 people we did early on. And we were like, oh, geez, we liked the idea of having Chris in the race. And then we saw that he was polling from Republicans. And it's a credit to Chris. He's a likable guy and a good candidate, and had bipartisan support. But yeah, it's going to be one of the fun things to speculate. I'm interested to see Bob Turner's presentation on this, to see what he thinks about where these votes came from and where they would have gone in a head-to-head race, and, what might have been.
You guys certainly, you can't discount 40 years of dentistry by Chris Matthiessen, crossing party lines and people voting for him. And I think that was a little bit of the case here. He knew a lot of people. He was here since he was 3 years old. He was just a good candidate in so many ways. And you're right. I think he did draw a significant number of Republicans, but probably it hurt Ron Kim more than it hurt John Safford.
That's fair. Yeah.
I do think he was definitely, a large factor, though, in constructively criticizing how our city council is running. He was not afraid to go to the city council meetings and speak up and hold their feet to the fire while, he was engaged in this campaign, which was something I really appreciated. And so
it was Chris. I mean, Chris, it's bravery. It's nothing else for him to go up there. And he was the one, the mic was taken from his hands. He was center stage in dealing with the, disruptions in city council meetings. He was there and really fearless, and I give him a lot of credit for that.
I'm going to interrupt here because there's a perfect segue. I have a letter, kind of like a press release, although not listed as such, from Chris Matthiessen that I just got this morning. I'm going to read it. It's a short one. Response to the November 7th election results. Thank you for this, from Chris Matthiessen. Thank you to everyone who voted for me and who supported my campaign for the office of mayor of Saratoga Springs. I was disappointed that we did not win. I continue to feel that my candidacy represented the best option for the future of our community, and that progress is possible without the chaos we have seen from the Kim administration. New paragraph. While Ron Kim deserves credit for a number of the programs that he has championed during his term, and I will probably be less supportive of John Safford's approach to city government, there is more to being mayor than programs. John Safford will serve as an honorable mayor who will bring civility and respect back to City Hall. It was a pleasure to congratulate John Safford last night for his victory. A true gentleman, Chris Matthiessen.
Very
gracious. That's a classy guy right there.
Yeah. And I know I've been talking, I think I've spoken to John 3 or 4 times this morning, talking about, well, geez, we've been running for months. Now we got to look towards governing and towards the transition period. And I think Chris is one of those people that, his support of John and his counsel is going to be invaluable, because he's been on the board, through contentious periods and seen, what governing looks like. And so I think he'll be, invaluable. Hope he doesn't, hope he stays engaged.
I just want to reiterate again, though, this was really, in my opinion, a true upset. I think the vast majority of people look at the Democratic enrollment advantage in Saratoga Springs and, thought Ron Kim was going to pull this out. I mean, I think it was, in my opinion, a true upset.
You do that at those, you see it in local government politics across the state and across the country. If you feel comfortable, you probably shouldn't be comfortable. And
Yeah.
I think that's, that rings true. We had some other results across the county which were, staunchly Republican areas that are seeing some Democratic inroads. So there's a lot of lessons in these elections from last night, to local party, local political party players, on what's keep an eye out for.
We've got a lot of comments coming in here. Dina Drake says, does Chris get a thank you fruit basket for helping with this result to restore civility? Yes, I think he deserves more than a fruit basket. We can toss in maybe a few bottles of wine in there too. Tim Miller says, it's great a Republican win with John Safford. Moving Saratoga forward. John Safford is a truly good human being. Yeah, we've got lots of positive comments there coming in, which is nice to see. Should we take a look at the numbers for public safety, perhaps? Let's see. There we go. So, as we know, Tim Cole won with a really pretty significant, almost 20 points, maybe, between himself and
Yes.
Kristen.
It's about 20 points, yeah, or maybe 18 to 20, I think.
And Kristen actually edged out Jim Montenino, who was the incumbent, which is pretty impressive, all things considered. But at the end of the day, I think it played out the way at least I was kind of predicting it would play out, and that they split a Democratic vote, pretty evenly, which led to a really strong victory for Tim.
That, I'm going to take that right there, Robin, because you segue me perfect. And I don't want to take anything away from the Republicans or one Saratoga. Mike, you guys scripted this months ago. You guys scripted this down almost to the fraction of a percentage point of how this would play out for a John Safford win, and I credit you for it. At the same time, the Democrats, both the individuals, we talk about Ron Kim, Jim Montenino, we got to acknowledge his mistakes, as well as the party itself, didn't endorse Michelle Madigan. Every mistake they could have made, they did. And then they would reload and shoot themselves in the foot again, just again and again. This was their election to lose. And kind of like Tim Miller commented there, I see he's a Buffalo Bills fan. Robin, you and I are Buffalo Bills fans. A football analogy, right? I don't want to say the better team, but the team that more expected to win went out there and in the first 3 plays did a fumble. Then they threw an interception. Then they got a 15-yard penalty. And the team that people didn't expect to win, in this case, the Republicans /one Saratoga, said, we're going to take that fumble and we're going to score. And we're going to take that punt that you got that we forced you to do, and we're going to march down the field and score. And that's how I see. The Democrats have only themselves to blame this morning. The Republicans and one Saratoga have every right to have their own parade because they played this beautifully. But the story is equally, wow, did the Dems really screw this up?
I made that comment to I forgot what reporter I was talking to last night, but that our priority was winning this race and getting our candidates into office. The Democrat priorities were never aligned. Ron Kim's priority was taking down Montenino. You heard him say it on the phone call. You're going down with me, Jim. You're going down.
Yeah.
That was the priority, was taking each other out. The priority wasn't putting someone in who's going to win. I don't know if they sincerely believed that Kristen Dart was going to win, but Kristen Dart didn't have a chance from the beginning. With row A and B taken up, no one on row E is ever going to beat those 2 lines. And you see it there. 1,800 Democrats didn't care that the party endorsed someone else or didn't care about Jim Montenino's mailer. 1,800 people still went up and went right down row A. And that's a lot of the voters. So, the Democrats this cycle had their priorities set elsewhere. And I think, like you said, that was a mistake.
For those of you that were Mad Magazine fans, Montenino and Kim were the classic spy versus spy, shooting each other, blowing each other up continuously. I guess that ages me because I'm talking about Mad Magazine. But for those of you that remember that, you'll probably agree with me.
I had that much out of it too. It's still out there, Dan. It's still out there.
Cartoon guy, kind of.
Yeah, and I had the PDF, Robin. We had trouble with it, but yeah.
Okay. I couldn't agree more with your assessment, and I do think they got really consumed with their feud with Jim Montenino, but I also think that Saratoga Springs in general doesn't like to be told by a city council, 4 out of 5 people on a city council, who to vote for. I don't think they like that. They don't respond well to it. We had several years ago, there was a Saratoga PAC that was a group of, longtime Saratogians, certainly wealthier Saratogians, bigger kind of players in the city who came together and formed this PAC and dumped a lot of money into it, raised a ton of money, and came out very strongly with who they thought Saratogians should vote for. And Saratoga went in the other direction. And I think it was in that case, they just didn't like the establishment Saratogians telling them who to vote for. And in this case, I think people didn't like that 4 to 5 city council people got together and tried to be kingmakers. They just, I don't think they responded to that well. And then also the third party line, there nowhere in the state has anyone won without a major party line. Being on a third party line is just such a disadvantage. And we're just not at a place where that has ever gotten enough traction to win the day. And so I think Kristen was, she was a great candidate. She ran a great campaign, but that ballot placement is just not something you can get over. It is what it is. You just can't win without a major party line right now.
Yeah. And Tim Cole, let's give him credit where credit is due. What a terrific candidate. Yes, I'm biased. I probably consider him a friend at this point. But I don't care. I've got friends that are idiots and I wouldn't vote for him. Tim Cole was a superb. Every time I called him, he says, yeah, Dan, I'm walking this neighborhood. And he was always walking the neighborhood. He campaigned hard. He's centrist. He's logical. He's reasonable. I'm excited for John Savard, and I'm excited for Tim Cole.
The other thing is that Tim never went negative, as far as I know. I mean, I never got a mailer from him that was negative. He kept it all positive. He campaigned on his own merits, his own accomplishments. And again, the way I witnessed these campaigns play out in Saratoga, when people start going negative in October, Saratogians don't like it. They just don't like it. They don't respond well. I mean, sometimes we've seen campaigns that from the get-go have just been constantly on the offense, like slamming their opponent. But when they're running a fairly positive campaign and then just take a turn in October and try to grasp onto whatever controversy they can, whether it was, Gordon Boyd trying to make a mountain out of a molehill about a campaign filing or whatever, voters, they don't like it. We're tired of the viciousness, and it's a small town, it's local politics, and you want to see people be respectful. And so I think Tim did that very well.
Yeah.
Well stated, Robin.
I met Tim back it must have been the winter. We had lunch at Mercantile, and because no one knew, everyone's texting me, Tim wrote a letter to the editor, and people were, who is Tim Cole? Who is this guy? I'm like, I don't know. So I reached around to get his number. I think someone sent me a number that was him. I think it was his wife's number. So I texted him, and we ended up getting lunch, and I'm like, he said he was interested in running. I'm like, let's have the conversation. So from the start, Tim, what you see is what you get. He's an earnest guy. He's a hard worker. He's got the experience. And, I don't know if anyone's ever done this. He just short of sweeping every election district. He only lost Skidmore, where he got 2 votes, but he won every single election district in town. Tim did. Wow. Which I think is pretty historic.
I'm going to throw up this comment from Moving Saratoga Forward because I would love your thoughts on it. This election was a referendum on BLM. All BLM endorsed candidates lost in Saratoga Springs. We've talked about this, but there was a very interesting column by Andrew Waite in the Daily Gazette where he said the public safety race in Saratoga is a referendum on Saratoga BLM. And he contextualized Kristen Dart as the BLM supported candidate, Jim Montenegro as the enemy of Saratoga BLM, and then Tim Cole as the person who was not in the conversation, just kind of rose above it and hadn't gotten into it at all with Saratoga BLM. Do you think, how much of a factor do you think that was in this election and how people voted?
It's interesting. I don't know if they formally endorsed anyone. There was obviously, they've certainly tacitly endorsed Kristen Dart with their financial support and walking petitions. And I think they've plugged her at a few of their events. I think for certain voters, BLM is a big positive or a big negative. I think the majority of voters, kind of lump BLM's activities with the general disruptions in City Hall, no matter who they're coming from. So yeah, I think it was a factor. It was obviously a factor for Jim Montenegro. He took a lot of what they were saying about him very personally. And, Jim is, said that BLM is essentially weaponized against him by other members of the council. To what extent that's true, I'm not sure. But I think it was a factor. I don't know if I'd say it was a referendum. I don't know if it was as big of a, factor as it might have been a couple of years ago. But certainly, you know, to some degree, sure. Yeah.
Mike, you'll also be pleased to know that moving Saratoga forward thinks Mike Brandy is the sexiest Republican chairman in Saratoga County.
Jeez.
Congratulations, sir.
Let's send someone a fruit basket. I don't know. I didn't even do my hair, Rob, and that's why I'm wearing a hat. I'm rolled out of bed this morning, and I'm like, I gotta rehydrate and catch up on some of my real job I've been neglecting. So.
What do you mean real jobs? We don't have real jobs. We just do this political stuff for fun, you know.
Oh man, yeah, right.
Really quick, while we're looking at these numbers, can you explain to people what undervotes are?
Yeah, an undervote means you left the race blank. So there was 156 people who submitted a ballot that did not vote in the Commissioner of Public Safety race. Overvote is the opposite. Those are people that voted for 2 or more candidates. So obviously either didn't read the directions or made a mistake on their ballot.
Right. Yes.
Something went wrong.
Yeah, something went wrong. I was looking at some of the uncontested races, and they actually had like a fairly significant, I guess not that significant, but write-in votes.
Yeah, some interesting write-in campaigns I heard about. I heard there was one with Moran and one with Manita.
Yeah, so with the Commissioner of Finance, there were 257 write-in votes, which is a pretty significant number considering I wasn't even really aware that there was a write-in campaign going on. So
yeah. There was a graphic that was circulated. I saw some door drops. So there was a kind of little grassroots push to write in Joanne Kiernan. Okay. I did. I wrote in Joanne.
And then let's see, the Commissioner of Accounts race.
Yeah, I heard there was another write-in campaign. I won't say it because it's a little kind of off color and I don't want to get into it. But yeah, there was another write-in campaign against Dylan Moran.
Yeah, and there were about 93 write-in votes there. The highest vote getter for a non-competitive race was Jason Golub, who's the Commissioner of Public Works. So there's that. Congratulations, Jason, on being the highest vote getter of the non-competitive races.
Certificates in the mail, right?
What's that?
I said the certificates in the mail.
Exactly. I did think it was kind of funny that some of the city council members who didn't have, Dan's back. Hold on one sec. There you are, Dan. I did think it was a little bit funny that some of the city council people who weren't being challenged were campaigning and then like congratulating themselves on their victory last night. I thought that was a little like puzzling. I don't know if anyone else observed that, but I just thought it was kind of strange. I kept thinking like, is there a secret competitor here that I don't know about?
The write-ins, I don't know. That's the you got triple-digit write-ins. I don't know.
I know.
Silly. That's the nature of it. It's politics. There's always that kind of self-aggrandizement and looking to plug yourself. I'm surprised. I'm honestly surprised that they didn't have a fundraiser. You're an unopposed person. It's election season. People are thinking. But I don't think the Democrats. I mean, Ron Kim didn't raise a lot of money, and I don't know if he wasn't trying to, but I think his campaign was largely self-funded. He didn't have a lot of donations, and Montanino was largely self-funded. Christian Dart had a lot of money, but a lot of it was from these kind of PACs or kind of out of city people. So I'm not sure if the local Democratic donor base wasn't engaged or just wasn't exploited this time around. But it seemed that there was less Democrat money locally in play. Just a side.
It actually seemed like, in general, to me, the fundraising totals across the board were really low. I mean, in mayoral races, we're used to seeing like 6 figures being raised. $100,000 is not abnormal for a mayoral race. And in this case, Ron, Chris, and John, I think, were pretty close in terms of what they fundraised. It was somewhere between like $25,000 and $35,000, pretty much across the board.
Stafford ended. I think by the time we do our last filing, it'll be mid 40s.
But still pretty small. I mean, in 2019 raised about $40,000 for a public safety race. I raised 20 something for an independent run for mayor. So I was expecting those totals to be a lot higher.
I found contacting Republican donors and donors is, people were disheartened after the last time around. They said, every 2 years we got to donate and we're going to lose. It's hard. People get exhausted. People get fatigued with it. And, they donate, they're like, all right, and it almost a little begrudging. But now I think we've shown that Republicans can win. Our line is valuable. There's a lot of Republicans in this city that show up and vote. So I think going forward, we've established that precedent, and we'll,
I'm going to put a tiny asterisk on that and say, I think you've established that when the Republicans work together with, say, a One Saratoga group, you can have big success.
Yeah, and I said it. I forget who I said it to, but I think that's, you know, I love the idea of a bipartisan group, a moderate group. I mean, we ran as Republicans, we ran a bipartisan moderate slate to begin with. I mean, Matt Veach, John Stafford, and Tim, who's a registered Democrat and a real centrist guy. You know, that's what we were looking for to begin with, and then to have a group like One Saratoga, you know, kind of look at our candidates and say, yeah, these are moderate, reasonable candidates. We like them too. And to kind of give them that stamp of approval kind of helps, you know, because whatever negative connotation people have about national Republicans, maybe they see someone else who they know and trust being like, oh, okay, maybe I should give these candidates another look. I think it gives us a little repute to have our candidates on that line. I think it's very valuable.
That segues me to 2 years down the road. Here you had just a great night. I'm like the guy at the track at the horse race. You know, the horse just ran lights out. It's still sweating. And the reporter says, oh, so what about the Travers in 3 weeks? It's like, hey, can I enjoy this win? So I'm doing that to you right now, Mike. But sure. In 2 years, you know, one of the if you had one, I don't want to say downside, but one shortcoming is you didn't have a full slate this year. Obviously, I got to think that's one of your goals in 2 years to contest every seat with quality candidates. Do you want to comment on that at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can say this now because it's after the election, but it was partially a strategic consideration to not run a full slate. You know, the target here was was the public safety office and the mayor's office. I certainly would have loved to run a full competitive slate, but the thinking, we didn't have a lot of interest from qualified people because again, they look at the campaigns, they see they're expensive, they're long, they're exhausting, and sometimes they're nasty. And it's hard to get people to run knowing that they're gonna have to do that every 2 years. And then if they get in there, they're gonna have to go sit on that council table and deal with what they deal with. So it's very hard to convince people to run and to, make that self-sacrifice. So that was the first difficulty. And then as we were looking at it, we started prioritizing the races. What do we want to fill? And kind of the strategic consideration was you take a popular, Jason Gold is a popular candidate. He got the most votes, as you observed, Robin, and he didn't campaign because he was unopposed. So we kept, we kind of sidelined some Democrats that might be more popular, might be better fundraisers, and focused on the two positions that we thought were the weakest. And I think that, might have had I'm speculating, but might have had a hand in driving down Democratic turnout, that there wasn't as many competitive races. Again, that's speculation. I'd love to run a full slate, next time around.
Well, Mike, I just have to observe though, after the 2021 election cycle, when you did have I know you weren't the chairperson at this point, but there was a full slate of Republicans running. They raised a ton of money. They seemingly had a ton of support, and 4 out of 5 lost their races. And so to me, trying to recruit people to run on the Republican line, like there wasn't a clear path to victory. But now I think you've proven that there is. And so I imagine you'll have more interested parties in the next election cycle.
I think so. Yeah.
Coming here from James Naples. No one was willing to run for finance or commissioner of accounts against Dems. Hopefully someone runs next time.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Take that name, Mike. James Naples. Call him up. Hey, I
James,
think you want to run.
Come on, Jim.
So I'm just looking at the supervisor results here. So these were the closest of all the margins in terms of where the candidates were. I think Michelle led Gordon Boyd by about 450 votes. And Matt Veach was the top vote getter, which was I've like lost my words today, which was a little, I was not surprised, but I guess I was pleasantly surprised by, because I know in 2021, it was the first time that he actually had received fewer votes than his Democratic counterpart. So it was very interesting to see him back up on top as the highest vote getter. I know he was happy to be back there, certainly. And then Michelle was able to pull out a win over Gordon Boyd. And I have to think in that race that Gordon going after Michelle as a Democrat going after a Democrat, I just don't think served him well. To me, that kind of explains the results a little bit, at least.
What I think on this one, I think supervisor, despite being higher up on the ballot, is really a down ballot race. It's not, a lot of people don't necessarily understand it, and they're disengaged. So I think this race is one of the primest examples of ballot placement and cross endorsements and the dynamics of the second vote. So, Borden is your pure Democrat endorsed candidate on here. Michelle is the fusion candidate, Democrat, One Saratoga, but unendorsed. and Matt Veach, your incumbents, with one Saratoga. So a lot of interesting dynamics in this one. I don't know how many people, I mean, what did Gordon, I mean, I'm obviously not on his mailing list, so I didn't get his mailers, but I saw what was going on Facebook. And I just wonder, I mean, did enough people see that stuff to even have an opinion on it? I don't know.
Yeah. I followed this. So basically Gordon Boyd made a couple of videos that were like, they were like animated. They were like kind of
Joe Saratoga. He endorsed John Safford. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, no, I did not see that.
The little cartoon man.
So it was like these kind of cartoons, but they were talking, it was really just like ripping Michelle Madigan's record, just going after her in a way that just didn't really land for me. It's just the whole animation and the whole video, but I was watching the video counts and they weren't super high, but I know he was, he's boosting stuff. It was a bit of a last minute, like the last 3 weeks maybe of this election. He really went hard against Michelle. And I was just kind of perplexed by that strategy because I just don't think that, resonates with other Democrats necessarily, that you're going after the other Democrat.
I extend that criticism though, Robin, to the party itself, right? Again, why didn't they endorse Michelle Madigan? I love Matt Veach. We play racquetball together. I'm glad he won. I think he again, the reasonableness, he's centrist. He reaches across the aisle more than anybody I know. But from the Democratic standpoint, they should have said, we should try to take out Matt Veach. And you do that by endorsing two candidates, not just one, and putting them together as a team. And they blew it again. They just blew it over and over and over. And that's, to me, that's one of the key stories of this election cycle.
And you want to know why? Honestly, it's because it's a small group of Democrats that have all these personal grudges against other Democrats. And they let the pettiness of these grudges win the day. And they don't look at it strategically. And it's like these just longstanding kind of little feuds in this small group of Democrats. And that's kind of who's controlling the Democratic committee right now. So it'll be interesting to see how Michelle's success in this election affects kind of the city Democratic committee makeup and maybe getting some fresh blood in there.
I've said this before, from the Republican side, it's easy to look at that and kind of like be like, oh, that's fantastic. Look at that division. Look at that dissension. Look what a mess they are. But on a practical side, as a resident of the city, it's affecting who they're putting up for office. They have a very powerful ballot line. I think they gotta figure their stuff out because it's affecting who they're putting up for office, and it's affecting us, the taxpayers and residents. So they gotta get their house in order. That's their duty.
I agree. We have a comment here from our old favorite, actually very young, but favorite contributor, Benjamin Glover, who no longer lives in Saratoga Springs, but we miss very much, Benjamin. We miss you. He said it felt like the Boyd campaign was trying to blow up something that was really minor. I completely agree. I think he's referencing Michelle was late on one of her campaign filings.
BOE is very lenient on that. They understand that treasurers are everyday people and there's a lot to comply with. I mean, Ron Kim got, an official finding from the BOE in, I think, January 23, because he was 2 or 3 months late on his post-election filing. And what the BOE did is they reached out and said, hey, they confirmed, yes, you are late. They reached out, said, hey, you got to fix this. They fixed it, and the BOE closed the case. That happens all the time. Yeah. It's not, it's not the gotcha moment that it was portrayed to be. So I thought that was kind of disingenuous, especially when, Ron Kim had the same issues. And I think someone was sharing a Post-Star article where Gordon's campaign had the same issues years ago. So it's a classic, glass houses analogy there.
Yeah. When you're going after campaign filings, I think it's so inside baseball too. I think it just does not resonate with like the general public. So I think that was kind of.
Can we talk about Jim? Oh, sorry, Robin. Sorry to interrupt. Can we talk about Jim Montanino last night? We all saw him at the inn at Saratoga. Sure. He was very gracious. He looked relieved. He looked kind of happy. He doesn't have to deal with this anymore. We've criticized him at length on this podcast. I felt a certain warmth from him last night. I couldn't help but feel for the guy in a positive way. Did he make significant mistakes in his tenure? Absolutely. I'm not going to give him a pass on that, but I still had a positive feeling for him last night, warmly congratulating Tim Cole. I just want to know what you guys thought about that. Sorry if I abruptly interrupted you, Robin.
No. Mike, do you want to respond? I mean,
we had certainly a number of differences with Jim Montanino. and called him out on a lot of things throughout the last 2 years. I met him during the campaign when he was talking about endorsing John Stafford, and I was, we were open to the idea, and it ended up playing out, and I'm happy it did. One of the things that I learned about Jim, and I think he referenced it in the letter he sent, was that he was going through some medical treatment, which was pretty invasive, and apparently Kim knew about it. And Jim, I think, underwent the procedure without anesthesia so we could go to the city council meeting. And that was the council meeting where Kim kind of let, BLM kind of go after Jim unrestrained. It said, what are you going to do, arrest him or something? And Jim alleges that Kim knew that he had just undergone this procedure. So with that context, going back and looking at that incident, which was already pretty disturbing, it really kind of blew my mind as far as this kind of deep level of the relationship between the two guys. It was pretty disturbing to learn that. Again, that's one side of the story, but still, it was gave me a little sympathy for Jim, knowing that was going on behind the scenes. Yeah,
that is pretty awful. I mean, the level of vitriol that they had that Ron Kim especially had towards Jim was it seemed personal. Like it got to like a personal,
very personal. Yeah, and that was it's got no place in at the city council table.
I agree. I will be totally honest here and tell you that I am still very conflicted over Jim Montagnino, because the first 10 to 12 months of his tenure as public safety commissioner, I think he inflicted a lot of damage on the department, from defunding the assistant chief to the amount of resignations to how he tried to insert himself into a case with lieutenant nomination. I mean, the list is fairly long.
I remember that. Yeah.
And the way he's treated our fire chief, Joe Dolan, I think has just been hideous. But he seems to, and I asked him about this when he was on our podcast, if his kind of initial impression of the public safety department evolved, while he was there, because it really seemed to. And then in the last 6 or 8 months, he's really kind of taken a turn and spoken up for the department and been very principled and kind of holding a line when the police department specifically was being criticized, that I think people really appreciated. But it wasn't enough for me to personally be able to look past everything that happened.
The baggage was still there. Yeah. And so I think I think looking at the ballot dynamics, I think there was a realization, again, I don't want to speak for the guy, but it seems that, the writing was kind of on the wall there, that the Democrat support was kind of eroding. So, I give him credit for going out kind of graciously and on his own terms. History will judge the full 2 years, but I agree. I think he, in the last couple months, there was certainly a change in his approach to the administration over there.
Yeah. And my God, he certainly got put on an island. I mean, I can't recall the last time I've ever seen a city council ostracize one of their own that way. I mean, to the point where he's trying to get change orders done for the fire station and he can't even get a second for his motions. I mean, it really got.
And not to mention the attacks he took from public speakers, called him, I'm going to quote it without paraphrase, piece of shit, and that and the other. It was horrible.
I think I take the cake for public comment, nasty public comments. It's not that terrible to sit through nasty public comments. You just got to sit there, look the person in the eye, hear it, take it in.
Nobody sitting in public service should have to put up with that. It was just wrong.
I agree, and I will say Mayor Kelly really did her best to make sure people weren't personally attacking us, or when they crossed the line, she would be like, you're crossing the line. Whereas Ron Kim does seem to give people kind of a free pass. And I'm hoping that's something that will change with this new administration starting on January 1st, because I know civility and kind of decorum at these meetings has been a central issue in the campaigns. And John and Tim have a lot of ideas and things they want to put in practice to hopefully kind of get things back to a more civil environment for public comment and city council meetings in general.
They have significant challenges, and that's probably not even saying it strongly enough. And Robin Dalton, better than anybody some of what they're facing. What I'm really interested to see is who's John Stafford appoint as deputy mayor. That's going to be a very, very important appointment. But that's it's going to be interesting. And I hope all 5 of them. Obviously, there's going to be some dissent, right? There should be. Dissent is good, but not dysfunction and nuclear fighting, and that we've seen the past 2 years. I hope there is some level of common good with the five of them. In fact, I demand it as a voter. I demand it.
And I would demand that as party chair. And I tell you, talking with John and Tim, that is their goal going in, is to work with the other three. There is no ill will. There is no grudges. There is nothing. They're going in there to get the job done for the people. That's what we ran on. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not for, any other reason except to, support the city and have good candidates in there. So time will tell, but I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic that this is going to be a whole new world at the city council table and for the city.
I mean, it does seem like the root cause of the toxicity was between Ron and Jim. So removing that element hopefully will give the other three city council members like a moment to kind of refresh and start anew, which I think would be a good thing for all. I also think that, Tim's idea of having a sergeant at arms present, I think that's a great idea. I know they are also talking about putting together kind of a plan on how they would handle disruption at city council meetings and submit it to the Attorney General's office, to which I just have to say, that's a great idea, but something tells me the AG's office, you're never going to hear back from them.
There's a division of local government services, and I think it's either the Department of State or it's the Attorney General's office. And the bottom line is the question needs to be posed to them. We have city council meetings because we're a municipality. We have to have them to get our business done. If someone is going to show up and prevent us or disrupt and prevent that from happening, obviously we can't have that. So there has to be something the city can do that's within the bounds of the law that is properly balanced with constitutional rights. That could be done. The question is, what is that? So I think, the AG's office has been a little politicized. So what are they, are they going to put their stamp on something and then later on say, well, you didn't do this, but you did that?
Yeah,
I don't know. So yeah, it's certainly be threading the needle. How we do it, whether it's the city works with a law firm or a constitutional lawyer to construct this, so you get the right eyes to vet it. But there absolutely has to be expectations, and those expectations have to be, backed up. You can't how many times did Ron Kim set a rule, then deviate from the rule, then change the rules, then deviate from the rule? There was no clear expectation in city council meetings.
A million times. And, once you let someone break the rules and go over their time limit, then, it's over, There's got to be consistency, and people have to understand what the rules are and that they will be enforced. But I do think it's super tricky. I mean, I think sounds, when you were describing it, Mike, it just sounds so similar to the protest problems we had here in terms of, people being in the street, they're protesting. When do you draw the line of, okay, we're going to have to clear the road, or no, we have to let this protest continue because it's their right to protest? It's kind of that same, balancing act that's really challenging. And I don't think anybody really has the right answer so far.
Yeah, because there's the legal, requirement, which is, on one side you get sued and you lose, the other side you're perfectly fine. And then there's the political component, how much you're willing to tolerate, and they don't always match up. So you've got all sorts of different interests in play with things like that. And, those same dynamics apply in with disruptions to city council, with protests in the street, with press conferences on the city hall steps. It's all, on the same spectrum.
We've got a lot more comments here. Let's see. Rita says, I feel no sympathy for Jim. He treated Joe Dolan terribly. He put his family through hell. I agree with you, Rita, 100%.
And that's valid. Jim made his own bed. I'll acknowledge that. But last night, I guess I was in a forgiving kind of mood.
Well, also, I just feel like as a human, when someone's been so ostracized from their party, from the council, it's hard not to feel a little compassion there. And he's always been perfectly friendly and polite to me, despite the fact that our politics or decisions, we don't always agree. And I appreciate that in any political candidate.
While you're bringing that next question up, I had a brief interaction with Chris and Dar last night, a very positive one. We agreed to have coffee down the road.
Well, can you try to convince her that the journalistic integrity of the Saratoga podcast has increased, and maybe sometime she'll come on? Well,
maybe she will. In fact, we should have a Democrat on next week, right? We strive to balance it. So maybe, Kristen, you're invited again. I think I speak for you and Adam. You'd be open to that, and as well as if she can't make it, I'd like to hear from another Democrat.
Absolutely.
What's that?
Get Tim. I'm sure he'll come on.
No, actually, and today specifically, we wanted to talk to Mike because of his success last night. He has done an incredible job, and we wanted to hear your thoughts on how everything went. And I didn't feel the need to bring on a Democrat. Today, they're handling all their losses. They're probably not ready to come on and talk about
They
it.
wouldn't have wanted to come. Yeah, they would have declined if they even took. If their phones are even on, they would have declined.
Yeah, I mean, if I were them, I'd be probably still in bed right now, asleep, which actually wouldn't be such a bad thing. But but yeah, Kristen certainly has an open invitation. I would love to have her on. Let's see. We've got a lot of other comments. Benjamin Glover's being a sweetheart. Thank you, Benjamin. You're rock.
We miss you, Benjamin.
Yeah, we do miss you. Benjamin's over on the other side of the pond in London, and I'm sad we miss him. It will be very interesting to see the deputies get chosen. That's always it's always an interesting indicator of how the office will work. I know when I chose Eileen Finneran to be my deputy, she was a Democrat, I was a Republican, and it was a big deal. People were kind of shocked that I crossed party lines for a deputy. But at the end of the day, when you're going into City Hall and you've never been there before, there is such a huge learning curve. I mean, I can't even describe. I mean, you really spend like the first 6 to 12 months just learning. Or at least that was, that was my experience. And so to have a deputy that knows what they're doing, knows the ins and outs of City Hall, in my case, when it came to Eileen and her incredible years of experience, I mean, she was just an unbelievable asset. And I can't imagine going into what we went into in those 2 years with someone who had never been there before as a deputy. So, but at the same time, convincing someone to leave their career or leave the job they're currently doing for something that's only a 2-year guarantee is really hard.
Right.
It's hard. Yeah.
Very much so, and that's one of the inherent issues with our system, right? The 2 years is very fast. I mean, what else is 2 years? Assembly and Congress. Usually, municipal elections are not 2-year terms. It's very difficult.
And you need like a professional person who has significant amount of work experience and can handle this big job. And typically, that person already has another career path that they're well down the line on. So
right.
And back to the 2 years, let's face it, the 2025 local elections start now.
Oh,
right?
shit.
I mean, really, there are people
Yeah.
thinking this through today. Oh, Ron Kin's
start
out
on Monday or something. Can you give us the weekend, maybe, please?
But the reality is, people are plotting as we speak.
Well, certainly now that, I mean, I think before last night, I would have said, if you want to win, you need to have the Democratic line. Now that's not the case. It definitely opens up, a larger pool of candidates. And so it'll be interesting to see who pops up. And I do feel like we've also seen so much engagement from the public over the last year or two that people's interests have been piqued about.
We had like 8.
Really?
Just to be there and to shake John's hand and chat, just kids that were, I think they were, they were all freshmen. I think they were probably, I don't know if they were just bored on a Tuesday night, but they all came out and were chatty. And I was talking to a few of them, really impressive young folks there. So it was cool to see some engagement from there as well. And there,
awesome.
We always write. Safford got 1 vote at Skidmore. Cole got 2. I think Matt got like 4 or 5. Like I said, that's the one district that Cole lost. So we don't usually expect much up there, but it was interesting to have that engagement with them. I thought it was pretty cool.
That is. And I didn't realize until this year in the forum that Skidmore had that the Republican club they had at Skidmore has been like disbanded completely and it's vanished.
Yeah.
Because back in 2019 it existed. And when we had a forum there, it was hosted by the Democratic and the Republican groups at Skidmore. So it's nice to see that there was some GOP support, I guess I would say.
And I'm also, I discussed that briefly with Bob Turner up there. And, that forum kind of, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that it was the Skidmore Dems hosting it. So when, a couple of days before we learned that, we're like, well, wait a second. Like it says on the website, their goal is to get Democrats elected. What are we doing? And, I wish, in hindsight, maybe going forward, I suggested to them, listen, if you guys don't have Republicans there, we have Saratoga County Young Republicans. We can, there's a high school club, we can do something in conjunction to make this, it can be at Skidmore, it can be wherever, but to make this a kind of youth focused and hosted event to give candidates a chance to talk and students and young people a chance to hear from them and make it bipartisan, at least, the optics wise. And that's something I'm very open to in the future. So, I wish we could have jumped on it earlier this time around, but, I think it's something in the future I'm super behind.
Definitely. I also have to say one other like really refreshing thing I found about this campaign cycle as compared to like 2021, National issues really didn't get pulled in very much, and there was a few times I think when Ron Kim tried to label John Safford like ultra
MAGA
MAGA.
this, MAGA that. Yeah, the MAGA boogeyman attack.
Yeah, but that was kind of late in the game, and
it was
but
a
it
little
wasn't.
desperate.
National politics really stayed out of the picture for the most part, and I thought that was a really good thing because we have so many issues locally that aren't partisan issues, and of course, I truly believe in the city over party philosophy anyway. So it was just nice to see that kind of reprieve.
Just an example that I was engaging with some people online who I think were Democratic committee people, and they would ask me this question. They thought they had me in like a gotcha question. They were like, "Oh, well, do you believe the 2020 election was fair?" Thinking I would equivocate. I'm like, "Yes, it was." Like, got anything else for me? And they're like, "Oh, do you condemn going to relitigate this?" There's people that are preoccupied with that, but I don't think those issues are issues locally. I mean, nationally, there's certainly issues, but I don't think our local Republican committee is caught up on these issues. And to the extent that there's a perception that we are, it's not correct.
Well, I actually think for me personally, like it actually is kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. If I'm talking to a Republican, we're talking about it in a campaign context, I just want to check that box because
you want the litmus test.
I do, but it should be such a basic, I basically just want to say, like, do you believe in democracy? Yes. Okay, cool. Just checking, because there are a lot of extreme people, in the National Republican Party who we know, have gone a litlittle loopy.
Well, it's just, I mean, I think one of the squad members was censored by Congress today for his pro-Hamas remarks, and to be fair, there's Republicans who will say the same thing to Democrats. Well, do you support Israel? Do you support Hamas? But it's not productive to have these, because you're going to use that to say that, okay, because you say A, your argument on B must be invalid. And it's not a proper argument, right? It's not logical.
But I do think now, of course, now I'm like bringing in national issues. I do think like the Israel-Palestinian conflict is a much more complicated, dynamic thing to comment on versus like, hey, do you believe that presidential election, do you believe Joe Biden was, duly elected?
Right. And there's different ways, just like the Israel issues, different ways to phrase the question, right? So was January 6th a riot or an insurrection? Doesn't matter. Was the election stolen? Was it fair? Is Joe Biden elected? I mean, all very subjective ways to pose these questions to kind of try to pin people down.
And when it comes up in Facebook comments, generally speaking, we know the goal is not to agree and move on. It's generally to just like poke and fight. So always a little suspicious in Facebook comments.
Well, it was refreshing to see people focused on local issues, and I think the issue, Safford pinned it down early on, safety and civility, and I think those carried the day, and then insurance came in late as well. But I think those are the three critical things this cycle.
We have one more question for
before you bring the next comment. I just have a quick question for Mike. Your phone calls you took today so far, and maybe some were confidential, but can you tell us the best one from the George Pataki call? Who was there a great call today?
No one really too big of note. I had a couple. I had a congressman text me, which is fun, but he's a friend of mine, so that's no big deal.
Okay.
Who else did I have? I spoke to my dad for a while. I thought it was a good one. Did various parts morning. I've spoken to John a few times. Haven't spoken to Tim yet. We'll touch base later. But nothing. A lot of super interesting, but I'll let you know if that changes.
Well, Mike, okay. I got to tell you, on Twitter, there was a lot of mentions and a lot of praise on Twitter for John Safford last night. I saw. I'm not a huge fan of him, but Lee Zeldin was like out and proud, really praising John and what you guys accomplished here. And so there was.
Yeah, we are the whispers on the higher levels of New York GOP. They're really impressed with what we did here. And so Saratoga Springs and Troy, both electing Republican mayors, is shockwaves across the state. That Republicans are alive and well in these kind of areas. And, there are ways to win with the right candidates and the right approach and the right message and certainly the right circumstances as well. You can't discount that. But like you said earlier, Dan, when you got to exploit those, just catch the interception isn't good enough. You got to run it back. So
and you guys did. A quick thing on John, a friend of mine who lives 6 months of the year in Saratoga, wrote, interesting outcome. Safford's civility platform apparently was appealing enough to voters. Having worked with John, I can attest to his civility. He is a very nice person. Then he added, though, can he manage the council? Interesting, but he confirmed that John is who we thought he is.
So so John manages HOAs, right? And HOAs, if you've ever been involved in one, can be really nasty boards.
Yes.
A lot of personal things. Your fence is on my property. You painted your house the wrong color. You planted the wrong type of grass. People get pretty intense about that kind of stuff. When it's their homes. And he actually manages my sister and my brother-in-law's HOA. And when I mentioned John was running, they're like, they're not been very involved politically, but they're like, oh, John's fantastic. Like I might have to vote on the Republican line. So John's professional perception of people that know him, Dan, I think your friend hit it on the head. Is that's just who John is. What you see is really what you're going to get.
And I am such a believer in, like, you have to lead by example, and you treat people the way you want to be treated. And so I think that, just his demeanor and the way he presents, the way he engages, will bring down kind of the level of anger and like vitriol that have come up in public comment, because you set the tone as the mayor. You really do. I want to just quickly get to this comment from Dina, because Mike, I'm gonna pass it to you. Predictions on FOIL requests dropping in 2024.
Well, I don't think I'll have as many to make, because I don't think there'll be as much going on that's really worth foiling. I think local governments will be a lot more boring over the next 2 years, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think we should be getting foiling for recordings of nasty phone calls. Those shouldn't exist to be requested in the first place. So I think there'll be less, at least on my end, to poke around. The vast majority of the foils are for things, administrative things, realtors searching for COs. Maybe those will drop with mortgage interests being up and fewer houses being sold. I know one across from me has been on the market for 8 months and the price has dropped by 60 grand and it still hasn't sold. So, I think they'll drop. I think the political foils will probably drop as well. Just because I just think it's going to be just less going on.
Well, less drama would be great, because we have a presidential election that's going to be occupying a lot of my time. So I can't have both going on at once,
Yeah, one thing at a time.
Yeah, one thing at a time. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. I know we've gone over the hour, so I want to let you go. And I know you've got you need to chill and rest, but also I'm sure there's
I got another meeting at 1:30. I just getting texted about another meeting at 5. So it's gonna be one of those days. So I'm fine with it though.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. It was fun.
Bye.
Congratulations again. Terrific.
All right, Dan the man. We're just
same bad time, same bad channel next week.
Yeah, you got it. Next Wednesday noon, I'll be here. We'll get Adam back. We've podcasted our little hearts out this week.
Yeah, well, I missed the other day. Adam couldn't make it today. We didn't acknowledge that, Adam. Sorry you couldn't make with us. Like me the other day, Adam has to earn a living. And
am I the only one that won all 3?
I'm sorry.
And was I the only one who did all 3? I think so.
I believe so. And don't look now, but don't we have a city council meeting Tuesday?
We have a city council meeting tonight.
Tonight? Oh, whoa!
Tonight.
I did not know that.
Yes,
I did know that at one time, but it completely slipped my mind.
Yeah.
So we're podcasting tomorrow? Just kidding. No, we're not.
Yeah. I was going to try to do a little preview of the city council meeting tonight in this podcast, because actually the agenda is it's packed. There's a lot of stuff on the agenda, but we've kind of run out of time here. I would just encourage people to go to the city website. You can check out the agenda. Again, it's jam-packed. And I'm also just interested to see if there's any change in the dynamic tonight based on yesterday. We shall see.
Wow. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I won't be there. Or maybe I'll watch on online.
I know. I'll be watching. All right, Dan, thank you so much. I'll see you next week.
Great, Robin. Thank you. Bye-bye.